Waffle, waffle.
Lego Star Wars character. Roger, Roger.
Oh, a Lego Star Wars reference. I think that's how we have to intro the show right there.
You're more than welcome to in the audio. You have control there. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players, an MLS podcast. We are going to do a new, I don't know if I want to call it like a series or a theme type of episode like we do with MLS history and things like that. We're calling it What If? An idea that Connor came up with, I'm fairly certain, like 3 or 4 years ago, like really early on in the DP pod history lore, if you want to call it that. And we just never really got around to doing it. But we found a pretty good way to integrate it into the show this week. And we are going to give it a shot by talking about what would happen if MLS removed the super draft presented by Adidas. Now, I will preset that, Connor, anytime you mention the draft, you have to say the MLS Super Draft presented by Adidas. Otherwise, Don Garber will hunt you down and make you pay for it. They paid real good money for that advertising spot. You better use it. Speaking of
That's under
Connor, he's here.
I am here. That is very understandable, and I appreciate you giving me credit for the lore, as you called it. But when you call it lore, it makes me think of like the iceberg. So
Yeah.
immediately my thought process was like, oh, DP Pod iceberg would be crazy.
Spin off. Because I did. That's literally the first thing I said. I'm like, oh my god, we've got another series. Let's go.
Infinite
7
series.
days a week.
Oh
Seven
my
days a
God.
week.
Honestly, we're pushing the amount of ideas that have been coming across. We honestly probably could get close to 7 days a week.
We're gonna need to hire out our own editors. We're gonna need to. We're gonna go massive, guys. So make sure you send us lots of money at the Venmo that we do not have set up. But I will if you want to give us lots of money to do all of this stuff. Oh man, this is a good time. It's been a while since we've chatted, so I'm excited to do something like this because, like Connor mentioned, it's very kind of free flowing. Don't really know how we're gonna lay it out yet. It's the first time we're ever doing it, so just kind of get out there and chat about things. We're gonna talk about kind of maybe the negatives of removing the draft, and then maybe a positive spin on what could happen with it. Very hypothetical. Not really gonna say which one we prefer or like because who knows if it even happens, but definitely going to dive into the way that it lays out. But we can't do any of that without doing Scarf of the Week. What you got?
So I picked out my scarves before my co-host decided to change the topic of the episode. So my scarf doesn't have a direct connection like I was hoping to. If I had my choices of scarves, I would of course take out Atlanta United because if we are going to talk about, wait, actually, did you mention the topic yet? Because I don't want to spoil it if you did.
Yes. Do you listen
Oh,
to me
okay.
ever? Jeez.
No, haven't we gone over this? I would take out my Atlanta United scarf because we are draft kings just based off of that first season draft, that alone. Getting
A single.
Miles Robinson and Julian Gressel in the draft is an insane pull. But I've at least got a team that I know does really well with young players, and obviously guys coming out of college, I think qualify for that young player tag. So I have got the FC Dallas scarf because odds are they've probably gotten at least a couple guys out of the draft that have panned out pretty well, but I know they're kind of more for their youth system, so it's a little bit of a stretch there.
Yeah, you're big on the stretching for players like that. I myself am rocking a brand new scarf that I picked up literally yesterday in stadium at this team's home game. A very thrilling 1-1 draw against the mighty New York Red Bulls, who have had two of the last three number one overall picks. It is very bland, but the other ones were not as good there. It's Charlotte FC. It's the first ever Charlotte FC scarf in the collection. It was this, or the other two options were like Argyle, like the cross, the old school diamond cross patterns. It looked kind of not great. So I was like, okay, no worries, I'm not going to do that. And then the other ones were that little like summer scarf material, like kind of silk woven. Not, I don't like that material. I'd rather get the nice wool one, especially for the prices that they're charging. So we've got a new one to the collection. It adds to the blue side of the wall and It also fits with the theme because, as I mentioned, they had the number one overall pick in 2022, traded for the number one overall pick in 2023, $400,000. Lots of money, but they got it. And then they also picked 14th, Tiger Smalls. Good old Tiger. Didn't play yesterday, but honestly, not many people played because that wasn't really fun. Very boring game. Very, very mid level of talent. But Dante Vanzier got an assist, so I can say I was there when he did something.
Dante, that's all Dante Vanzier does is get assists.
That's why he should be
You know,
playing as a wide
God forbid
cam.
your striker scores a goal.
Well, that's why he should be playing as a wide cam, and Lewis Morgan should be playing as the 9. But what do I
Or
know?
you could just sign a striker that can actually score goals.
Whoa, 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 whoa! We don't do
We don't do
money.
that around here,
We don't do
partner.
that. Well, yeah. What do you think you're talking to here? All right. Well, let's dive into this here, and I genuinely have no idea how we're going to do this, but well, again, this is just the first time. We'd love to have comments on how we can improve this. But I think we start as we always do on the podcast. We start negative. We go all the bad things first because that's what this pod is about. I've got a couple of things that I want to hit on where if MLS were to remove the draft tomorrow, what would happen? So let me preface this by explaining why this is an idea, right? So just last week, the collective bargaining agreement of the NWSL was renewed, in which a lot of people are calling it the most player-friendly CBA in history, where they got tons of player rights, including more charter flights, and I think one of the other big ones that came out of it were trades, no trades without player approval, which is great. Absolutely love that. And then the last one was no more NWSL draft. College players are free to sign wherever they would like, so long as the team has the cap space and what have you to sign them. So that got us thinking, what would happen if MLS removed their draft system? So we're going to go with a negative spin and a positive spin, and kind of just play out the hypotheticals. I don't know how far down the line we'll play it out, but we'll do that. So Connor, give me a negative scenario, I guess. Run it out as far out as you'd like.
Well, I guess my question for you before we jump into the negatives would be, what's the path then if there is no draft? Would teams just get to sign players once they're done with college?
Yes, yeah.
Just kind of like
It's
free agency kind of thing.
exactly. It's like an undrafted thing.
Gotcha. I mean, I guess maybe it could make teams stray away from people out of college now and make them less enticing because with the draft, you're kind of like, I don't want to say you're forced into it because obviously you can trade away draft picks. You can do whatever you need to with draft picks. You have flexibility, but you kind of are ushered in the direction of we're going to draft a guy to add to the team that's coming out of college. Like we are going to add guys to this organization who are coming from college. Whereas if you take away the draft, it's like, okay, we don't have to. Like there's nothing really, it's not like we're going to waste a draft pick if we don't go sign somebody out of college. So maybe it kind of takes incentives away from teams to look for guys that go to college versus just people who are coming through your academy since like age 14, who you've been training in your program and getting ready for your system. I think they're going to favor those guys over the guys that are coming from college. So I think there's a chance that guys could have some, there could be less people coming through from the college system. And I definitely think that's a negative because there's been a number of guys who have come through and been very successful from the college system. I mean, there's guys like Kamal Miller, there's guys like DeJuan Jones, Tajon Buchanan, Dane St. Clair. Like, there's a number of guys who you can go through the list and rattle off a bunch of names of guys who have come through the draft and done very well. Guys who have come through the draft and now in modern day MLS are making moves over to Europe for multi millions. Guys like Tajon Buchanan, Duncan McGuire is on the cusp of that soon too. So it's definitely a very useful tool for adding good players to teams. And I think getting rid of it kind of incentivizes teams to look, well, not incentivizes it, but it takes away the incentive of looking at the draft when you have draft picks and you don't want to just like let that go to waste.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my focal points here is this decreased reliance on the college game to build out either the bottom part of your roster or your second team, right? So as you mentioned, the draft basically forced teams to look at college players, even if it meant that they were looking to build out their second team. It was very much a okay, we've got these picks. Let's at the very least take a look to see if there are some diamonds in the rough somewhere, places that we can take these players and add them to our group. Now, if you're saying that you have to sign them like free agents, well, now you're saying, okay, I've got a bottom part of my roster. I can either add a college player to it who may or may not pan out, is a little bit older for the most part, most college kids are, or we've got MLS buying power. We can go overseas and go South America, go European, go Asian, go wherever we want to go, and add those players just with tam, gam, yam, bam, thank you, ma'am. Which way are they likely to go? Based on age, based on immediate impact, based on a whole host of different things. More often than not, they're going to go overseas for it. That then pushes this idea that okay, you're going to have a college kid and you're either going to offer him an MLS Next Pro contract or most likely, which we've already seen happening with players from the 2024 MLS Superdraft presented by Adidas. Don't worry, I got it in there. Don't come after me, Don Garber. You've seen a lot of those players either go back to school because they didn't want to take the MLS Next Pro contract anyway, or they ended up signing over with USL sides. So just picking off, for example, Jackson Lee, a 28th overall pick this year from West Virginia, ended up signing with Rhode Island FC, which is the new USLC team in, you guessed it, Rhode Island. And that's par for the course. I'm saying I've got two players who've done that already, just from the draft itself, not to mention the other ones who went back to college. But then you also had that whole list of players who chose to say, I'm going to bypass the draft completely and go back to the USL Championship. So you're either trying to sell somebody to say, I'm going to sign you to a third division contract and maybe one day you'll work your way up, or I'm going to sign you to a first division contract. You're not going to get off the bench. Or the third option is USL comes in and says, we're going to sign you to a second division contract and, whole other conversation, but USL pushing for D1 status and that whole, saga over there, you can try and sell somebody to say, yeah, you're going to be a part of a big project that's doing X, Y, and Z. And just there are a lot of different pathways this can go, which makes it that much tougher to, I don't want to say waste, but to use a slot on your roster or on your second team roster for players coming out of college. So much so that knowing the way that these owners work, they're just going to bin off anybody who's not a top 10 player in the Mac Herman Trophy and just say, okay, I'm going to go and sign somebody outside. Or, not, and I was going to end it there, but I have another idea. It could mean that any player that they had in their academy system that chose to go college over like the academy pathway, it means that those players are really the only ones on their list and they just end up taking them from there, which honestly wouldn't be the worst of the four options there. But I think with the difficulty that it would cause with so many different ways to get these players involved, that a lot of these owners would just say, ah, screw it. If you're not the best of the best or you're not one of our own academy kids, we're not even going to bother looking, which is a problem when you've got people rightfully so saying, oh, too many people go through the cracks, right? Too many players, we aren't looking far or wide enough, right? Well, the one outlet we had to look at players that were not just strictly academy kids may, if it goes away, now we've lost really the desire to go look at that area, and that's not great.
Yeah, I think one other negative I wanted to tack onto this is not necessarily just from an MLS perspective, but just from the player's perspective. I feel like, again, it's incentivizing them to stray away from the college program. If you're a younger guy, like coming out of high school, you have the option to go play in the FC Dallas Academy, or you can go play for one of the teams in college. And I think if they got rid of the draft, you don't have this direct pipeline through college to get into the league. I think there's way less incentive to go to college then versus going into the academy where you do then have a direct pipeline into the league. You could just grow through the team and get your chance with the team to get into the league, or even just like get more familiarity with people around the league just by playing through youth academies and MLS Next Pro and all that stuff. Versus I can go to college, which is a very good thing for them to do, get a degree because you never know what could happen with your career, and have this like insurance in case something God forbid did go wrong and your career ended abruptly. But it's a little concerning that without the draft, there would be way less incentive, I think, to go to college to potentially have a pathway to the league. And I think that could have maybe some more long term effects of guys who bet on themselves and went to academies and skipped out on college and got a couple of bad injuries. Their career didn't take off, and now they're stuck with no degree and no soccer career, and really hurting themselves in the long term.
Yeah, I know that feeling firsthand. I was on my way and pop goes a shoulder and I was stuck being a scientist. I mean, what a life.
How
Unbelievable.
miserable.
I know, it's terrible. In this hypothetical scenario where the teams end up just saying, screw off the draft, agree with you completely there. In the fact that now you're making people make these decisions, but with the way that it would go, where they get to sign players if they're good enough, college doesn't necessarily force them out. But even at this point, we're still seeing the majority of talent come through homegrown signings versus college draft again, right? It used to be all draft, and then we put the academy in. It was heavy draft, some academy, and now we're kind of flipping. So I think we've been leading towards that way anyway. But that doesn't, like we said, that doesn't mean that we haven't seen success come out of the draft. You listed a whole bunch before, right? It's
One name.
definitely. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say one name I absolutely missed, and should have been a much bigger talking point for us in this discussion is Moist Bombito.
Perfect.
Literally
Uh,
in his last draft, and then just went for like 7 million overseas.
Yeah, I think it was two drafts ago, but your sentiment still stands, right? We talk about pay to play being really tough, right? And MLS is full of free academies now, and it's very, very good. But some people, the overseas players, considerably, right? Moise Bombito being Canadian, if they come over here, they're still getting, free ride. A lot of them likely getting free rides to play college soccer if they're that good. It might take away a pathway to play with less expense, I guess, for lack of a better term, which is never good, right? We want people to be playing for less and less money as we go on. But if they choose to go away from that and try and force themselves into an academy system, I mean, we look overseas and everybody loves to use the English example, right? So I'll use the English example. The academy system over there is brutally, brutally, I don't know if I'd say broken, but I was listening to another podcast that had on, I think it Neil Warnock? It was a Peter Crouch podcast. I think it was Neil Warnock.
I feel like I saw a clip from it, so I think I may know what you're talking
Yes.
about.
And he was coming out and talking about how his life after managing in Premier League, Championship, wherever, was really focused on redesigning the English system because you'll take these kids in at 8, 9, 10 years old, put them all the way through your development academy, and then as soon as year 12 or 17 years old comes around, you cut them off. Well, now what? Right? They don't have that path forward. So you take a really big risk, and then they're scrambling to look to play in America and things like that, where things like that. And I don't have all the details there, so that's the only reason I'm not like laying it all out there. It's kind of his project, so I'd love to see where it goes. But even if you go through this whole thing of being, you know, been off the draft completely and go only through academies and whatever, it's still a huge risk to a lot of players. The risk just moves around where it goes, and that risk increases if you don't have that. I've always seen college soccer, especially in the Division 1 level, as a failsafe, a basket, if you will, to catch the players that fall through. Right? Not all of them got caught for sure, but enough of them do where it prevents everybody who doesn't make it out of the academy from falling through. I'm not sure that if we got rid of the draft that we would instantly see a better uptick in talent recruitment, through our academies or what have you. So I don't think it's a from a team standpoint, I don't think it's a instant win because now you have to focus only on your academy, right?
Yeah, that might be a tough thing to kind of measure too, because I feel like academies are just getting better every year, regardless.
Oh,
Just
sure.
because I think the sport's getting better, there's more investment in the academies. There's, stuff like MLS Next Pro, just more opportunities to, build guys up through the academy versus like, and I think it's grown year over year. So I think even if you took out the draft, it's kind of hard to measure how much it could potentially improve an academy because I think academies are just improving in general anyway. I mean, unless they just like skyrocketed and all of a sudden academies were just, blasting out $20 million European signings all of a sudden as soon as the draft went away. But I think that's very highly unlikely to happen.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. I think that's totally fair. I think the other kind of big red flag that I think we all expect and are knowing is this idea that you lose out on the parity aspect, right? The whole reason that American sports work the way they do is that when you aren't good, you get first dibs at the good players to make yourself good, unless you're the Jets, and even that doesn't help you. Except for this year, Aaron
Yeah, sure.
Rodgers. We're
Sure.
back, baby. Right? If you're saying, okay, I'm going to be a top 10 guy and I want to live on the West Coast, and you get two teams that approach you, and it's LAFC who are playing for League Cup title today. They're in the hunt for the Shield, and they're likely, they've been to back-to-back MLS Cups with talent all over the place that continues to get sold for massive money. Kike Oliveira out for $8 million now. So, or you're going to go to San Jose, who are about to concede the most goals in the history of the league for one
And they kept
season.
a clean sheet last night.
I know
Put
how
some
mental,
respect on the San Jose
bro.
name.
Ridiculous that team. First of all, seeing my prediction saying "ha, no thanks," and then turning around and saying, "Yeah, guess what? We're also going to ruin your bold prediction too." Bombs. But they come around and say, "Hey, yeah, so we sold Cade Cowell for 4 million, and we had Chris Wondolowski play for us once, and we were good in 2012, and we made the playoffs in 2018,
Yeah, we have Jackson Ewell.
and we got Jackson Ewell playing center back. Like, which one are you going to go to? Obviously, even if it means that you're rolling through the academy system, you're going to go on the team that's doing well, right? So, and that's 95% of people would do that, right? So clearly that means you would have teams that would miss out on some of the best talent, specifically the lower level teams. The gap that exists between them already widens and stays wide, and there may be a possibility to turn into more of a European style super teams versus the rest sort of setup, which I don't think many of us who actually support the league would like to see. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, here's what I'd have to say on that. I think in a lot of other American sports that holds a lot of weight. Like if you got rid of the draft, that's a huge deal. I think it absolutely shifts in the direction that you're talking about of super teams in big market areas, just kind of collecting all the best players. And I understand there's a salary cap in a lot of leagues, so there's kind of like actually I think it might only is it just the NBA that has a salary cap? It might be.
And no,
Uh,
they all have salary caps. They're just
Does
softer.
I don't know if
They're
MLB
just
has a salary cap the
they're
way the
just
Yankees do signing
they're
players.
just softer or harder than others. Some are salary caps with an extra salary cap on top. Some of them are hard
Yeah.
caps. You got things like that.
Okay. Okay. But I think regardless, I look at baseball for example, right, where it has a very soft salary cap. At least that's what it feels like. And what are the teams that are good every single year because they stockpile a very high payroll? It's the Yankees and the Dodgers. It's LA. It's New York. That's kind of the direction I would see going. I don't think it would go that way for MLS in this case because one, there's a very strict salary cap here. So I don't think they'd be able to do that in terms of like teams having to bid with one another in order to get players as opposed to like I have a right to this draft pick. Like I'm just going to draft you. Like nobody has to compete with me for this spot if you're available. And also for the fact that the draft just isn't as influential as it is in other American sports. Like the NFL and the NBA, the draft is massive. It's a huge night for a lot of teams who haven't done well in the last season because you have someone who can come in and immediately become your Chicho Aranjo, who could become your Messi. Like I'm not saying someone's coming out of college and is at the level of Messi, but having that kind of impact on your team, just being like
Get them
the guy.
comments. Get them comments.
But just like coming in and being the guy on your team straight out of college. And it's just like there are guys who've come through the MLS draft and have done very well. Sorry, the MLS draft is sponsored by Adidas. Sorry, I've been
Thank
dropping the
you.
ball on that.
Thank
Uh,
you.
And they've done well. They've earned big money moves, as we were talking about with Bombito and probably soon to be with Duncan McGuire, but they're just not the top of the top guys who are absolutely going to game change for your entire team, like straight out of college. So I definitely think that if you got rid of it, it wouldn't necessarily just divulge into creating super teams with the way that the cap is structured and how influential the draft actually is. But I do think over time you might start to kind of head in that direction of there might be less parity in the league.
You, I was going to save that whole spiel for the end about the impact of this change anyway. That was kind of going to be my negative, positive. If this were to happen, how impactful is it really? So thanks for stealing my thunder, but
I
that's
always
okay.
jump the topics.
Yeah, you
That's just
literally you
my
have no
thing.
patience. I agree with you. That's what I'll say there. So I'll kind of explain more about it later. But I think the reason why this is such a big deal out of the NWSL is because a lot of their talent still does come out of the draft, right? So you can see NWSL turning more into a less parodied league than MLS would. So if I had to rank the negatives in terms of the lesser reliance on these players would be number one, and then obviously the parity would be number two for that exact reason, right? As much as that happens, you're talking about 2 to 3 players a year really who are making quasi impacts to teams, right? I'm actually looking at this 2024 year here. Logan Farrington getting minutes, Tyrese Spicer for Toronto FC getting minutes, Jacob Morrell getting some minutes, Malachi Jones getting minutes, Buck Rock getting some minutes, Tiger Small and Yannick Bright getting some minutes, Jose Kajima getting some minutes, Giorgio Koskevsky maybe getting some minutes, and that's about it in the first round, right? So you're talking a draft at 29 spots. We listed 5 guys who are playing in year one, right? You it's not as impactful as you just mentioned to this league as it is to other leagues. So definitely agree with you there. But since we've gone down the negatives, let's chat positive. What do you got in the positive realm? How could this play out to be a good thing in the end?
Letting players get paid their worth. I think that's the biggest thing that jumped out for me because I was looking into this while you were talking before, but
Oh, you weren't paying
the
attention to me when I speak? Wow, that's crazy.
yeah, hence why I never know what you say. So,
What?
um, anyway, so I was looking up the salaries for draft picks for this last year, and I looked up Tyrese Spicer, who was the number one pick in the most recent draft, and he is making 71,401 as the base salary and 74,000 guaranteed compensation, which like from an MLS
I,
sense
I,
is like pennies.
I
Like
wonder what his I wonder what sorry, I don't mean to cut you back, but I wonder what his contract clause is to get that extra dollar.
I have no idea. that that was
Right? Like,
that was
oh
that was
no, if
just
I
the
don't if I
blank.
don't hit 25 appearances, I'm losing $1.
That's I think that's how much maybe everybody in the first round makes. I looked up a couple players towards the top of the draft, and they all made that base salary. It must just be some calculation they do or whatever. But I mean, obviously, like comparatively to everybody else in the U.S., like it's probably good money. It's above the median salary of what people make in this country. But from an MLS perspective, in the MLS bubble, it is very, very inexpensive, which is good for teams, bad for the players. Like I look at Luis Abram, who's making like 10 times that amount of money. And it's like, are you really 10 times the level of player that these guys from college are? I highly doubt it. So I think if you got rid of the draft, there's no like, oh, you're a draft pick. This is how much you're going to be making. Like it's set in stone and it's pretty low amount of money. Now you can have teams bidding for you if you are the best guy coming out of college. Multiple teams bidding for you is going to drive up your price. You're going to make more money. And I think overall, that's a good thing from a player's perspective. And I think that could be a positive for possibly, wanting to not tie yourself down to one academy. It could maybe be an incentive to go the college route. And I can take a couple of years, get a degree, and then if I do really well, I could have teams bidding on me and drive up my price and get more money. So I definitely think that could be a positive for getting rid of the draft.
No, I agree. I think and this is one of the reasons why we mention we're not going to share too much on if it would happen, because for that to happen, where teams are bidding on this one player coming out, the single entity model would need to be removed. That doesn't happen in the way that the league is set up now. And you can argue good, bad, and different. I don't care enough to argue back with you, so you can argue with the wall. But that is a really good hypothetical that wouldn't happen unless the entirety of the league is restructured, which I got a feeling isn't happening anytime soon. But the one thing I will say is that, kind of going back to a note that I mentioned before, is teams would be able to utilize the college system almost as development team. I'm trying to phrase this the right way. Almost as like development teams for their academy kids. So I'm looking here right now, and of the first 28, picks, whatever. One, two, three, four, five of them had MLS Next Pro or MLS kind of ties in their academy teams, that are listed here. Only one of them went back to the team that they were in the academy for, and that was Chicago Fire's taking Brian Dowd out of Notre Dame. Great school. Montreal took Grayson Duty, who was in the LA Galaxy system. Real Salt Lake took Kevin Bonilla, who was in the FC Dallas system. Atlanta United took Jaden Hibbert, who was in Red Bull system. And then SKC took Ryan Shue, who was in Atlanta's system. So instead of these kids who were developed by the team, and again, this is now also leaning on the idea that these academies are getting more and more prevalent in their younger lives, and they've stayed with them a lot longer, right? You're not spending 6 years to develop a player just to have him shipped up across the country to play for a team that, is going to be your rival, right? Hypothetically, of course. You can utilize this setup as, okay, be in our academy system for X amount of years. If we don't think you're ready right now, you can either, and by ready, we mean MLS Next Pro ready. Like you're still a little bit off, but we still think you have a future. Go off to UNC, go off to UConn, right? Where you can keep your skills up, you can play a little bit. Then maybe after your freshman year, if you ball out, we'll sign you on a contract then. There's no, wait till your sophomore year and see what you can do. We'll utilize it almost as a development pathway. Now, do I think that it would be like that versus just putting them in MLS Next Pro and moving on? No. But you don't know what other teams would do here. This is a hypothetical. So it would be cool to see that happen. But yeah, even if you continue to go down the list, right? Inter Miami took somebody from Philadelphia, right? RSL took somebody from NYCFC. Charlotte took somebody from Orlando City, right? Like all of this time that was put into developing these players, and you're just losing them for nothing on a draft. Somebody saying, "Yep, you came out of college. I want you now." And it doesn't fit. And I know the draft is the American way of doing things, and I don't have a problem with the draft, by the way. I enjoy the draft. I do. I text you all the time to strangely very little reply. I don't know why.
That's because they do a draft in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week.
What are you doing? Working? No, you're not.
Yeah, working.
Ridiculous.
I'm sorry. I don't have time to take out of my 2:00 on Thursdays to go watch a team take a timeout in the middle of the draft.
Facts. It's different though, right? Where here, because there's this whole process of teams having their own academy and putting all this time and effort in developing a player, you can't just say, "Oh, they play in college now, I want them." Right? It's not like the NFL. It's not like NBA where it's like, "Oh yeah, they came through this AAU team," or I don't even know what the like development for NFL is, if there's like a league under that. But it's not like that where it's just, "Oh, they played on this team, they've got natural ability, let's sign them." Right? This is a completely different look, and it probably should be revamped a little bit. At the very least, if it's going to be that way, there should be some payment for it. But I do think a positive of removing the draft would be to allow a restructure of something like that, where you're not just putting all this time and effort to develop a player through your academy just for him to say, "Oh, I kind of want to go to college just in case," like we were talking about before, right? The idea of having that backup plan, and then, "Oh, I got to move across country now."
I'm trying to think if I can think of another positive, but I think I was
Well,
mainly
I think there are tons too, right? Just to build off of that, like the idea of you mentioned getting paid what you want, and we talked about the parity aspect of the being a negative to the teams, but the positive is player focused, right? So yeah, the parity aspect means that you're going to go to the better teams, but it also means that you're going to get to choose where you live. You may get to stay at closer to home. You don't have to pack up all your bags and just move across the country, right?
That's true. That's a good point.
And that's kind of the big one. Because what I'm noticing stuff like this where DC United picked a guy from Portland, right? Literally across the country. He would have had to move. Now he stayed and played at Sacramento Republic, but you're looking at these players like literally trying to go thousands and thousands of miles away from home for their first time ever. Some of them, hypothetically, and you don't have to. If you get rid of this draft system, that doesn't have to happen. You can go ahead and set up the process such that they can pick where they get to play, which is positive. So again, I think the negative is always team focused, right? And we have that the player focus as well, where it's less reliant and they move away from them, right? But the positive is all player, right? And that's why the NWSL CBA was so big. It's a very player positive CBA.
I think there are positives and negatives from a player perspective. I think if you're one of the top guys in college, it's definitely very, very positive. Feel like though, if you're kind of a more like middle of the ground player who is maybe like a late first round draft pick, an early second round draft pick, there's a decent chance now where previously you could have a direct pathway right to MLS or an MLS academy or one of the two teams versus if you got rid of the draft. I don't think a lot of teams would necessarily look in that direction if you're kind of at that level of maybe like second or third round pick. Now you're probably looking at USL as an option for them where maybe that's the direction they're already going. I don't have the data to look at where all the second and third round picks ended up going, but at least with the draft, like a team drafts you, you seemingly, unless I'm misunderstanding the draft, would have an option to go into their academy. Whereas I think getting rid of the draft, they're probably not taking a look at second and third round picks too often. I think they're going to focus on the academy and the couple of top level guys coming out of college.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree there. I think there's always going to be positive and negatives to the both, to both of it. But I guess the last thing we can kind of talk about is how does it pan out for the development of players slash league long term, right? So if this were to happen, do we as a country get better or do we get worse? And I'll leave that to you.
I feel like I want to disagree with the thought I have on this because it just, for some reason, logically, it just doesn't feel right. But a part of me feels like it would get better without it because I think you would see players go into academies more, like you were talking about. I mean, you kind of already touched on that, where most of these guys, it sounds like, are affiliated with some kind of MLS team, and then they just go to college, and based on their performances in college, they likely move around to another MLS team. But I think the level of coaching is probably a bit higher with MLS teams and MLS academies versus yeah, and like what they have access to in terms of like facilities and training
Sure.
programs and all of that versus like losing potentially 4 years of that key development playing in college. And it's not that college is going to like ruin your career, as we talked about. There's plenty of guys who came out of the college system and have done very well for themselves. But I think if they stayed in MLS academies, they could potentially grow as players even more. And it's a risk because obviously more people in the academy, it's going to be tougher. It's going to be tougher to kind of stand out and be more of a breakout player who climbs up, which I think is worse for the players, better for the teams. I think it'll be good for the teams in terms of finding more talent and guys pushing to reach higher levels. So there, I kind of am leaning towards that. I think the development would be better without the draft system. But again, it just I feel like I'm missing something because it just kind of also doesn't feel right to say that.
Yeah, that's the American sport, and you're trying to break
Yeah,
break the
I think it's
mold.
that. I think you're right.
No, that's exactly what it is. Because I was in kind of the same boat. I'm like, draft has produced so many good players in NFL and NBA, and it doesn't make
Yeah, it
sense that it
gives
doesn't do the same
opportunities for
here.
these players and stuff. And it's like it's weird to be like,
Right,
yeah, you should get rid of it because it'll make soccer better.
right, exactly. And again, there's always two ways to look about this, right? There's does it make MLS better? Does it make all of soccer better, right? Where if you go and draft a guy and you throw him in the academy or you throw him in the MLS Next Pro system, he doesn't pan out. If he's not showing what he can do, or he gets hurt, or this whole bunch of things, that career may just be over. Whereas if he has options from USL, USL1, MLS Next Pro, like the lower levels, and he gets to choose where it's close to home, it's a better fit. You might see that player blossom better than if he had to move across the country and play in a an empty stadium of MLS Next Pro guys, and there's this whole thing that goes out there. Now, that's generally overall. I think you're just letting players find the best fit for them, which means that they could end up being more successful long term. Now, MLS specific, I think we're pretty much break even. I don't think it matters too much. Like we mentioned before, it's the reliance on college players is not as heavy as it is in other sports. I don't think that getting rid of the draft would be a net negative. I think you lose out on that one or two player a year type of impact, but for the most part, you've already got such a heavy reliance on your academy kids for the anyway for most teams, that the odd one or two college kids that aren't there isn't going to hurt you too much. So I think overall, I think that it's a net positive just for the game, right? Whether it means that this player is in the U.S. system, whether they choose to move overseas. I've seen a couple people go to like Finland or something, and if that's their fit, that's their fit, right? But they're not locked into something where it's like, oh, we don't really want to let you go, even though HLK Helsinki or whatever is coming over with a bid. Like, oh, I don't know if I want to let you go right now. Like, it gives them the freedom to move and fit the best for them. So I think it's a net positive, but not as big of an impact as it would be for NFL, NBA, or even NWSL right now, who has kind of set this tone. So
Yeah, I would agree with that.
go
I
ahead.
would love to do if I had more free time, I'd love to do more analysis on and see how many guys kind of slip through the first round that end up having, and I know this is subjective. Obviously, there would have to be some criteria, but I'll call it like a successful career, because I think those are the guys you probably miss out on by taking out the draft. Because I still think the top guys end up joining the league, so I don't think MLS is missing out on your Duncan McGuire's, your Moist Bombitos. I think those guys were top 10 picks. I think at least 10 players out of the draft are probably getting signed to MLS teams somewhere. So I would be curious to
I
see. Huh?
actually did that
You
way
did
back
that? Of
when,
course you did, you loser.
kind of. Not here, but oh come on, no. For one of the series I did in the off season when I was still using Instagram, um, was redrafting the like last 10 drafts or something, just to kind of see who had the best career overall.
Yeah.
And let me see if I'll scroll down here and find it for you. So I just list some couple names, but the first one that comes to mind, Jack Elliott. Jack Elliott, like a fourth round supplemental draft pick, turning into one of the biggest impactful players for Philly over the last couple of years.
Yeah. Kamal Miller, I think, was also a second round pick. Probably another guy that might have slipped under the radar without the draft.
Sean Johnson, number 51 in 2010. Stephen Beitashour, number 30. Seth Sinovic, 25. Eric Alexander, 44. Chris Schuler, 39. Those are the positions they were picked. Joe Willis at 50. Joao Plata at 49. Michael Boxall at 51. Hector Jimenez, 34. Bernardo Anor, 48. Servando Carrasco, married to Alex Morgan, I believe, 27. Ray Gaddis at 35, quite the career he had in Philly. Daniel Steres, 66, still going. Miguel Ibarra, 65. Brian Rose, 63. Aaron Schoenfeld, 58. Antoine Hopino, 89. Kevin Vargas, 75. I mean, these are just some of the names that are rolling off the tongue here. Seems
Yeah.
like they got, oh, Adam Yan, Atlanta United legend at 53.
Yeah. I mean,
Alex Dijon, 80.
these are guys that I think probably would fall under the radar without the draft. And
I can't
you
believe
you
you
have
let me go that long without cutting me off. I'm just
I
out here naming random
once
MLS draft picks.
once we started going down the once it just got too long at that point. We were getting into some murky territory. But
Aaron Long, 36. I got to get that one in there.
yeah, fair enough. But yeah, I mean, like, you may miss out on these guys without the draft, and I think that's where you kind of have to weigh weigh those pros and cons. Like, how much quality are you losing, missing out on a couple of these guys who probably kind of fall through the cracks versus, I don't know, I guess getting more people in the academy. Like maybe some of these guys develop even better in the academy. I don't know, but that's why it's a hypothetical.
Yep. Well, we are very appreciative of everybody listening to this kind of first installment in the series of What If. And we've got a whole bunch of other ones, but let us know some hypotheticals you'd like us to dive into. We've already got a couple on the list, but we will always add your thoughts. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you follow us anywhere you get your podcast so you know when our next episode goes live. It is probably going to be MLS history or MLS news. I kind of want to sit down and chat this whole Luis Suarez not being suspended thing. I think that'd be
Oh
kind of
yeah,
fun.
saw a lot of
Um,
discourse about that on Twitter.
yeah, lots of anger there. So I'd love to chat about that. Um, Make sure you follow us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok to see all of our clips. We're finally getting our TikTok clips back out there. Uh, I got my computer running again, so we're running on that. But yeah, make sure you help us get there. We're at 524 subs. I'd love by the end of the year to get to 600. I think that'd be such a cool thing. Triple our subs in a season would be really cool. So get out there and do that for us. And then remember, you guys got to pay Connor what $700 an episode so we can get our editors and do 7 days a week, make it our full time job.
Why are they paying
Uh,
me?
I don't know. You're the money guy. You do the spreadsheet. You keep track of everything.
As long as I can put it on
Exactly.
my resume.
You could put whatever you want on your resume. That doesn't even need to be true.
CFO,
Yeah,
CFO of the
CFO
Designated
of the
Players
designated
podcast.
players. Love it. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.